The Queen's Judgment. The twin suns of Valaris hung low over the shining city, their golden light washing over towers made of silver glass. Every street glimmered like a jewel in the heart of the galaxy. The alien capital world was alive with music, banners, and thousands of proud citizens, for today was the day the Queen herself would meet a delegation from the newest species in the Union. Humanity inside the royal hall. Queen Zura of Valaris sat upon her throne carved from crystal, her eyes cold and bright like molten gold. Around her stood nobles, generals, and scientists from dozens of worlds. They whispered and laughed softly as the doors opened and the human envoy walked in. Captain Ryan Hale of Earth stepped forward, his black uniform marked only by the small blue insignia of the Terran Alliance. He carried no weapon, only a data pad and a steady calm in his eyes. He bowed politely. "Your Majesty, I bring greetings from Earth and words of peace," he said, his voice respectful yet strong. The court murmured. Some aliens tilted their heads, others covered their mouths trying not to laugh. To them humans were strange, short-lived, emotional, fragile creatures born on a chaotic world. Queen Zura leaned forward, her lips curved into a thin smile. "So this is a human," she said, her voice smooth like velvet but sharp as glass. "Tell me, Captain Hale, are you the strongest of your kind?" Ryan smiled faintly. "No, Your Majesty. Just one of many who serve." Laughter rippled through the chamber. The Queen rose from her throne, her tall frame towering over him. "How curious," she said. "Your people call themselves explorers, yet your bones break under pressure. Your skin burns under sunlight. Your hearts stop with fear." She walked slowly around him, circling like a predator. "Tell me, human, what strength could your kind ever offer to the stars?" Ryan looked up at her, the light from the crystal ceiling reflecting in his eyes. "Maybe not strength of bone or fire, but we have strength of will," he said quietly. The hall fell silent for a moment. Then the Queen laughed, a bright, cruel sound. "Strength of will," she echoed. "How poetic. Perhaps one day you will show me this invisible strength." Before Ryan could answer, the ground trembled. A low rumble echoed through the palace floor. A few nobles gasped as dust drifted from the crystal ceiling. An aide rushed in, his face pale. "Your Majesty." An explosion in the lower reactor bay. The Queen frowned. "Contain it," she ordered. But before the aide could respond, another tremor shook the hall, louder this time. The light crystals flickered. One shattered overhead, sending shards raining down. The alarm screamed through the corridors. The guards drew weapons, chaos spread like wildfire. Outside, through the tall windows, they could see smoke rising from the lower city, columns of fire climbing toward the palace. "Evacuate the Queen," shouted a commander. But Zura raised her hand. "No panic," she declared proudly. Yet her voice wavered as another blast rocked the walls. Flames began to crawl along the tapestries. Ryan turned to his officers. "We need to get the civilians out," he ordered. "Seal off the corridors near the south reactor." The alien soldiers hesitated, unaccustomed to taking orders from a human, but his steady tone made them move. Zura stared at him, surprised. "You will not run." "Human," Ryan shook his head. "No, Majesty. Someone has to help." The floor cracked. A surge of energy roared through the hall, knocking several guards down. Smoke filled the air. The Queen coughed, her golden dress catching sparks. Ryan rushed to pull a burning banner off her shoulder. "Stay behind the guards," he said, but Zura refused. "This palace will not fall," she shouted. The ceiling groaned above them. Ryan looked up and saw the structure bending. "We need to leave now," he said firmly. But the Queen still tried to command her soldiers, until a massive shockwave hurled her throne across the chamber. The wall split open and a flood of orange fire poured inside. Without thinking, Ryan ran forward, grabbing her arm as the flames advanced. The guards had already fled down the corridor. Leaving her trapped, Zura tried to pull away. "Release me." "Human," she demanded, but Ryan's grip tightened. "If I do, you die," he said, pulling her through falling debris. Heat pressed against them like a living beast. They stumbled through a passage as the palace behind them exploded in white light. The Queen's jewels melted, her breath came in sharp gasps. Her perfect city was turning into a nightmare of smoke and fire. From the window above, alien citizens screamed, running through the burning streets. The elegant spires of Valaris were collapsing one by one. Ryan pushed through the rubble, guiding her toward an emergency gate. His face was streaked with ash, his uniform torn. "Keep your head down," he said, shielding her from a blast of sparks for the first time. Queen Zura saw fear, not in him but in herself. This creature she once called weak was now dragging her from death while her own guards abandoned her. As they reached the last corridor, another explosion thundered behind them. Ryan turned back only once to see the palace engulfed. The fire reflected in his eyes like the fury of a sun, she whispered, barely audible through the roaring flames. You run toward fire, he looked at her, sweat and soot covering his face. Someone has to, he said simply, then lifted her in his arms as the ceiling began to fall. The queen, for the first time in her life, said nothing outside. The sky of Valaris burned red, the city screamed, and one human carried a queen through the heart of the flames, and that night, the galaxy would remember that a so-called fragile man had walked through fire, carrying pride itself on his back. Firestorm in Valaris. The night sky over Valaris turned crimson. Towers of flame rose high, painting the stars in red and gold. The once beautiful capital had become a burning sea. Screams echoed through the narrow streets, and the air was heavy with smoke and fear. Captain Ryan Hale carried the alien queen through a corridor half swallowed by fire. His boots sank into melting crystal floors. The heat scorched his skin. Every breath felt like fire entering his lungs, but he kept moving, one step after another. Queen Zura coughed weakly. Her once glorious crown had fallen somewhere in the chaos, her silver armor blackened by soot. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. You will die if you keep this up, she whispered. Ryan's eyes were calm despite the burning world around them. Then I die trying, he said simply. Behind them, the palace began to collapse. Massive shards of crystal crashed down, the sound like thunder from the heavens. Ryan pushed through smoke so thick he could barely see. The queen shielded her face against his chest, her pride fading with every breath she took. They emerged into an open courtyard, the sky above them full of fire and falling debris. Ships exploded in the air, and the ground trembled as energy cores detonated one after another. Zura looked around, horror in her eyes. Valaris. My city, she said. It is dying. Ryan didn't stop. He placed her down beside a shattered fountain, then ran toward a group of small alien children trapped under a beam. Without hesitation, he threw his shoulder against it, his muscles trembling, veins standing out on his neck. The queen stared, unable to look away. He was bleeding, coughing, but he didn't stop until the beam rolled aside. The children cried and fled, shouting words of gratitude in their strange tongue. A commander of the royal guard appeared through the smoke, shouting, "Your Majesty, come this way, we have ships ready." But when he saw Ryan, his voice changed. "Why is that human touching you?" Before Zura could answer, a blast wave tore through the plaza. Hurling them both backward, the guard was gone in an instant. Consumed by fire, Ryan fell hard but got up again, pulling the queen to her feet. She looked at him with disbelief. "Why do you help me?" she asked. "You owe us nothing." He gave a faint smile through the ash. "Because you're alive, and that means there's hope." The word struck her heart like a blade of light. For all her life she had believed in strength, in hierarchy and pride. But here was a creature weaker by every standard, defying death with nothing but will. They pushed onward deeper into the ruins. The once lush gardens of the palace were now black and burning, alien trees collapsing in showers of sparks. Ryan guided her toward the emergency hangars where escape pods might still work. But halfway there, a collapsed bridge blocked their path. Below them, molten rivers glowed like lava. "We can't cross," Zura said. "It's impossible." Ryan scanned the ruins, then saw a fallen maintenance rail still hanging over the gap. It swayed dangerously, but it was their only chance. "We'll make it," he said. Gripping her hand, the queen froze, her golden eyes wide. "You would risk falling into the fire for me?" He didn't answer. He just stepped onto the beam, his boots slipping on the hot metal, the heat rising from below like the breath of a monster. He looked back at her. "Come on, trust me." Zura hesitated only a moment before following. The beam shook with each step, sparks rising around them like stars. Halfway across, part of the beam snapped. Ryan pulled her forward just as it broke. They fell together, crashing into debris on the far side. Pain shot through his arm, but he forced himself up. "Helping her stand, you all right?" he asked. She nodded weakly, staring at him with something new in her eyes. Not arrogance, not fear, but respect. Ahead of them stood the entrance to the emergency hangar. The heavy doors bent and twisted by the explosion. Ryan found a control panel half melted. He tried to power it up, sparks bit at his fingers. "Systems are dead," he muttered. The Queen touched the console, her own wristband glowing faintly. "I can override," she said, "but it will take time." Ryan nodded. "Then I'll hold them off." "Hold who off?" she asked, confused. He pointed toward the shadows forming through the smoke. Mutated security drones, their programming corrupted by the reactor fire. Glowing red eyes scanning for survivors. Ryan raised a fallen rifle, its charge unstable. He took position in front of her, breathing hard, his burnt hands gripping the weapon tight. The Queen began her override, fingers shaking. Behind her, the drones crawled closer. Metal limbs clicking against stone. Ryan opened fire. Blasts of blue energy lighting the smoke. He moved fast despite his wounds, hitting one then another, but more kept coming. Their laser shots grazed his side, his uniform burning. "Almost done," the Queen shouted, her voice trembling. "Make it faster," Ryan said, coughing blood but still standing. One drone leapt forward. Claws raised, Ryan met it head-on, slamming the rifle into its core and kicking it backward into the flames. Finally, the doors groaned open. Zura turned. "It's done," she cried. Ryan grabbed her hand and pulled her inside just as the hangar roof collapsed behind them. They fell against the floor, surrounded by silence, the fire raging outside. The doors sealing shut. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was their ragged breathing. Then Zura whispered, her voice low and trembling. "I saw your kind is weak," she said, "but maybe we are the fragile ones." Ryan looked up, his eyes tired but steady. "We all burn the same in the fire," he said softly before collapsing unconscious beside her. The Queen knelt beside him, her hand hovering over his chest, feeling the faint beat of his heart, and for the first time, the ruler of Valeris wept for a human, the human who wouldn't stop. The hangar was silent except for the crackle of fire outside. Thick smoke crept under the sealed doors. Ryan Hale lay on the cold floor, his breath shallow, his body shaking from exhaustion. Queen Zura sat beside him, her eyes unfocused, her heart racing faster than she wanted to admit. She pressed her glowing bracelet against his chest. Trying to scan his vitals, the device flickered weakly. "Your heart rate is unstable," she whispered. But there was no answer. He was still breathing. Still alive outside, explosions continued. The sound of the city dying echoed like distant thunder. Zura stared at the human lying before her, his face streaked with soot and blood, his uniform torn and burned. She had called his kind fragile, yet he had carried her through a storm of fire. She reached out a trembling hand, brushing ash from his face. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Ryan's lips moved faintly. "Because someone has to," he murmured, even unconscious. His voice was calm, steady, unbroken. Zura looked toward the control panel, flames reflected in her golden eyes. "The fire will reach us soon," she muttered. She needed to move, needed to think. The door leading to the emergency tunnels was sealed by debris, but there was a small maintenance shaft on the far side of the room. She could escape through it. Alone. She turned back to the human, his chest rising and falling. His hand burned black in places. She could leave him, no one would know. But something inside her refused. "I will not abandon him," she whispered to herself. With surprising strength, she lifted him onto her back, staggering beneath his weight. "How ironic," she muttered with a small sad laugh. Now the Queen carries the human. Each step was agony, her legs shaking as she dragged them both toward the maintenance shaft. The air grew hotter, the metal walls glowing red from the fire outside. Her armor crackled, sparks danced on her skin. Finally, she reached the hatch. She kicked it open. A rush of cold air hit her face. Below her stretched a narrow tunnel filled with smoke and dust. "We have to go," she said, half to herself, half to him. She climbed down slowly, her breath coming hard. The tunnel was endless, dark, and twisting. She could hear explosions above, the world collapsing, but she focused on each step, one after another, just like he had. After what felt like hours, she reached the end of the shaft, a small service corridor leading to an underground transport line. The lights flickered weakly. Power failing, she laid Ryan on the floor, his skin pale under the dim glow. "Stay alive, human," she said softly. "You are not allowed to die before I understand you." She opened a medkit from the wall and clumsily tried to wrap his wounds. Human biology was strange to her, but she did what she could, pressing her hand over his heart until she felt it beating stronger. Then his eyes opened slowly, his voice hoarse. "You didn't run," she stared at him, speechless for a moment. "You saved me," she said. "I could not leave you." He smiled weakly. Guess you're not as heartless as your speeches sounded, he murmured. Zura frowned, but there was a small warmth in her voice. Do not mistake compassion for weakness, Ryan chuckled faintly. That's what I've been trying to tell you. For a moment, silence filled the corridor, the kind of silence that comes after surviving something the universe didn't intend anyone to survive. But the peace didn't last. A deep mechanical hum began echoing through the tunnels. The ground vibrated. Zura turned sharply. That sound, it's the reactor core expanding. Ryan pushed himself up, pain stabbing through his body. We need to get to the outer lifts, he said. If that core breaches, this whole level will vaporize. He tried to stand, but his legs trembled. Zura stepped forward, grabbing his arm. Lean on me, she said. I will walk with you. Together they moved down the corridor, the walls glowing orange as heat bled through the metal. Steam hissed from cracks. The Queen's long hair was singed. Ryan's boots melted at the soles, still they didn't stop. Finally they reached a large chamber where an old transport tram waited half buried in debris. Ryan stumbled toward it, pulling open the side door. We can use the tram to reach the outer ring, he said. Power's low, but it might hold. Zura climbed inside, helping him sit. She pressed her wrist device against the console. Ancient symbols flickered to life. The tram began to move, rattling down the ruined track. As they moved through the tunnel, flashes of fire from the city's underbelly lit their path. Zura stared out through the cracked window, tears forming in her eyes. Valaris was supposed to be eternal, she whispered. We built it on perfection, on order. But one spark and it all falls apart. Ryan turned to her, his voice tired but steady. Nothing lasts forever, not even stars. What matters is what you do when everything burns. She looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time, she saw not a fragile being but something unbreakable. The tram shook violently, alarms screaming. The reactor behind them collapsing. Hold on, Ryan shouted, grabbing the controls. The tram burst through a collapsing tunnel, fire chasing them like a living beast. The screen showed one exit ahead, a broken maintenance ramp leading to the surface. That's our shot, Ryan said. If we make it there, we live. Zura gripped the seat. And if we don't, he smiled faintly. Then at least we tried. The tram roared up the ramp, flames bursting behind it, the world shaking apart. And just as the tunnel caved in, it shot out into open air, crashing into the wastelands beyond the burning city. Silence, only the sound of wind. The two survivors lay amid the wreckage, breathing hard under a sky of ash and smoke. Zura turned to him, whispering, You wouldn't stop. Even when the galaxy told you to, Ryan smiled, his voice almost a whisper. Humans never stop. And in that broken world of fire and ruin, the alien queen finally began to understand what true strength meant. The ashes of pride. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon, but it brought no warmth. The proud city of Valaris lay in ruins. Towers that once touched the stars now burned black against a crimson sky. Smoke coiled into the air like mourning ribbons. The wind carried the scent of metal, ash, and sorrow. Captain Ryan Hale lay beside the wrecked tram, his uniform torn, his body covered in burns. His breath came slow but steady. Queen Zura sat beside him, silent. Her royal robes reduced to ashes, her crown gone, her golden skin smudged with soot. She looked out at the distant flames, her heart heavy. Her people were scattered, her palace gone. Her empire, her pride, had been reduced to dust in one night. For hours she sat there, lost in silence, until the faint hum of an approaching aircraft drew her gaze upward. A rescue vessel descended through the clouds, its searchlights cutting through the smoke. Soldiers in gleaming armor rushed out, shouting, Your Majesty, we found you. Zura stood slowly, her body trembling. There are survivors, she said, pointing to Ryan. See to him first, the soldiers froze, looking at the human with disgust. He is only a Terran, one said softly. He should not be. Do as I command, she snapped, her voice sharp as lightning. The soldiers obeyed immediately, lifting Ryan carefully onto a stretcher. Inside the ship, Zura sat beside his medical bed, watching the machines hum softly as they worked to keep him alive. His face looked peaceful now, his burns wrapped in silver healing film. She stared at him for a long time, remembering the fire, the pain, and the way he had refused to stop. When they arrived at the orbital station above Valaris, the Queen was met by the High Council of her world, nobles and generals bowing deeply before her. Their eyes were full of shock as they saw her covered in soot and scars. Your Majesty, we feared you were lost, one said. We have already begun declaring the human responsible for the explosion. The people demand justice. Zura's eyes snapped open. Justice? She repeated. You call this justice? The hall fell silent, her voice echoed through the chamber. Filled with fury and grief, that human, she said. That fragile creature you mock carried me through fire when my own guards fled. He saved me when your soldiers ran. Gasps filled the room. The generals exchanged glances. Some looked away in shame. One of the counselors stammered. Your Majesty, surely you exaggerate. No human could endure that level of heat or radiation. It is scientifically impossible. Zura stepped closer, her golden eyes blazing. I saw it with my own eyes, she said. He carried me through the inferno, through collapsing walls, through death itself, and never let me fall. The chamber trembled with the weight of her words. Another noble whispered, But why, Your Majesty, why would he save you? Her voice softened, trembling like a whisper in the storm. Because he said someone had to. The silence that followed was heavy. Even the hum of the station felt muted. She turned to her aide. Show them, she ordered. The recordings from the palace monitors moments later. Holographic images filled the room. The council watched as fire consumed the royal halls. The video showed Ryan, his body burned, his uniform melting, lifting the queen from under collapsing beams, carrying her through smoke and flame, shielding her from explosions, never letting her go. When the footage ended, no one spoke. Some of the officers bowed their heads. Others wept quietly. Zura turned to them all. This is humanity, she said. The species we called weak, fragile, emotional. They are not perfect, but they possess something we have long forgotten. Courage born from pain, and loyalty that survives the fire. She walked to the center of the room, her voice steady now. From this day forward, no one on Valaris will insult or enslave a human again. The counselors hesitated, unsure, until she raised her hand, her golden bracelet glowing. By royal decree, Captain Ryan Hale of Earth is to be named Protector of Valaris. Whispers erupted through the hall. A human? Protector? Zura turned sharply, her voice cutting through the noise.
He protected your queen.
Your city, your people, when no one else did. If that does not make him worthy, then none of you are. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, one by one, the council members knelt before her. Later that night, Zura walked alone into the med bay. Ryan still lay unconscious, connected to life support tubes, his heartbeat steady but weak. She sat beside him and whispered, You changed something in me, human. You broke my pride and showed me truth. She reached out and held his hand. Careful not to hurt the bandages. When you wake, I will tell you myself that Valaris owes you its life. She leaned closer, whispering one last sentence. You carried me through the flames. Now I will carry your name through the stars. Outside the window, the burning planet slowly dimmed, its fires cooling under the pale light of dawn. The ashes of pride had given birth to something new. Respect and perhaps the beginning of peace. The Queen's change days passed like drifting smoke. The fires on Valaris slowly faded, leaving behind a wounded world and a silent sky. The once golden city now stood as a scar of blackened towers and shattered crystal. Millions mourned the loss, yet spoken whispers of the strange creature who had carried their queen through the inferno. In the royal medical wing, the soft hum of machines filled the air. Ryan Hale lay asleep, his body wrapped in healing light. Each breath he took was a quiet victory against death itself. Queen Zura sat beside him, her once proud posture softened, her eyes carrying a sadness no crown could hide. Every day she visited, bringing reports, speaking softly though he could not hear. Your people have sent messages, she said once. The Terran fleet has offered aid, but our council hesitates to accept. They fear humanity's rise, she looked down, her hand resting gently over his. But I will not let them turn away. That evening, the galaxy gathered on the massive station of the Galactic Union. Representatives of 40 species assembled. The hall shimmered with light from distant stars, and banners of every world hung above the marble floor. When the Queen of Valaris entered, silence spread like wind over water. Her once perfect armor still bore the burn marks of the disaster. Her golden robes torn and blackened, yet her presence commanded awe. She stood at the center, facing the endless tiers of alien delegates, members of the Union, she began, her voice calm but firm. I come not to boast of survival, but to confess my failure, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Her golden eyes scanned the assembly. I built a world that worshipped power, that measured worth by perfection. We looked at humanity and saw weakness. We mocked their fragility, their emotion, their mortality. She paused, her hand trembling slightly. But when my world burned, when my guards fled, when my palace fell, it was a human who carried me through the flames. The room grew still. Even the floating holoscreen stopped flickering. He was wounded. His lungs filled with smoke, his skin burned, but he did not stop. She continued, her voice breaking slightly. He carried not only his own life, but mine. He carried the honor of every being who still believes in mercy. A soft murmur began among the delegates. Small species from the outer rim, the ones who had once been mocked for weakness, nodded quietly. Zura raised her head. I learned that day that strength is not in unbroken steel, but in hearts that refuse to surrender. Humanity may bend, but they do not break. Her words echoed through the vast chamber like a quiet storm. The representative of the Drake, a cold-blooded warrior species, stood up, his voice low. You would have us believe that fragile humans are stronger than we are. Zura turned toward him. Not stronger in muscle, not in lifespan, but in will, she said. And will is the one force that outlives every empire. The hall erupted in debate, voices rising and falling like waves. The queen waited, her face calm, until the Speaker of the Union, an ancient being of light, raised his hand. And what do you propose, Queen Zora? She took a breath, her voice steady again. I propose that humanity be granted equal standing in the Union, that they no longer be treated as primitive or expendable. Gasps filled the hall, some in disbelief, others in hope. The humans risked everything for a world that scorned them, she said, and if we cannot see their worth now, then perhaps it is we who are blind. Her speech was recorded, transmitted and replayed across star systems. Across dozens of worlds, beings who had never even met a human watched as a queen bowed her head in gratitude to one. In the following weeks, the story spread like wildfire. Holofeeds replayed the footage from the palace. Images of Ryan carrying the queen through flames became a symbol of endurance. Children on distant planets wore badges with his name. The Fire Bearer, they called him. On Earth, humans watched in silence, humbled and amazed. For centuries, they had dreamed of respect among the stars. And now it was beginning one evening. Back on the medical ship orbiting Valaris, Ryan finally opened his eyes. The soft light above him blurred, then cleared, revealing Queen Zura sitting beside his bed, her hands folded, her eyes wet. Hey, he whispered, his voice weak but alive. You made it out. Zura smiled faintly. A rare and fragile thing because of you, she said. You carried me when I had lost everything. He looked confused. You'd have done the same. She shook her head slowly. No, human, I would not have, not before, but now. Perhaps I would. Ryan tried to sit up, wincing. So what happens now? Zura stood, looking out the window where the rebuilt city glimmered faintly beneath the stars. Now the galaxy learns what it truly means to be strong. She turned to him again, her voice soft but sure. You showed me that power without compassion is nothing but emptiness, and I will never forget that. Ryan smiled faintly. Guess we're not so fragile after all. Zura placed her hand on his shoulder. No, Captain Hale, she whispered. You are the fire that refuses to die. Outside, the stars burned brighter than ever, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy began to change, not through conquest or war, but through understanding born from ashes. The fragile species that endured weeks passed since the firestorm that nearly erased Valaris from the stars. The once mighty capital was now a world under reconstruction. Metal ships hovered above ruins, carrying supplies and workers from every corner of the galaxy. Among them, humans worked side by side with alien engineers, rebuilding the city brick by brick. For the first time in history, alien leaders saw humans not as weak helpers but as equals. They watched the Terran teams lift steel girders with robotic exosuits, their faces covered in soot and sweat, yet their spirits unbroken. One alien architect whispered quietly, "They never tire, even after loss," and the others nodded in silent awe. Inside the newly built Royal Hospital, Captain Ryan Hale had recovered enough to walk again. His steps were slow, his left arm wrapped in a bandage glowing with healing light, but his eyes were alive, strong as ever. He stared out of the window, watching the people of Valaris work together below. Queen Zura entered quietly behind him, wearing a new robe of white and silver, simple and unadorned, no longer the proud armor of a ruler, but the humble dress of a leader reborn. "You should still be resting," she said softly. Ryan turned with a faint smile. "I've rested enough. My people would tease me if I stayed in bed while there's rebuilding to do." Zura walked beside him, looking at the city below. "Your people," she repeated. "They work even without command, without glory. They simply—" "Help," Ryan nodded. "That's what we do best. Survive, rebuild, stand up again." She looked at him with quiet admiration. "You call it survival, I call it something greater." The next day, the grand plaza of Valaris filled once more. Though its beauty was scarred by blackened stone and smoke marks, representatives from dozens of worlds gathered. Cameras from across the Union broadcast the event. On the stage stood Queen Zura, and beside her, Captain Ryan Hale of Earth, dressed in his formal Terran uniform, the burns on his hands still faintly visible under the sunlight. The Queen raised her voice for all to hear. "When Valaris burned, it was not my armies that saved me. It was not my technology or my pride, it was a human." A wave of murmurs passed through the crowd. Zura continued. "A being from a world we once called a death world. One we mocked as primitive, one we saw as fragile." She paused, her eyes finding Ryan's. "But in our darkest hour, it was that fragile species that endured the fire." She turned to him. Then to the galaxy watching, "Captain Ryan Hale of Earth, for your courage, sacrifice, and unbroken spirit, I name you protector of Valaris, guardian of the crown, and friend of the Union." The crowd rose, the applause began like distant thunder, then grew louder, echoing through the entire plaza. Even the skies above filled with ships flashing their lights in salute. Ryan stepped forward, humbled. "Your Majesty, I don't deserve titles," he said quietly. "I only did what anyone should do." Zura smiled faintly. "And that is why you deserve them." As she placed the symbol of honor, a glowing crystal pendant, around his neck, the holographic projectors captured the moment, sending it across every world. From the deserts of Drake to the floating cities of Numa Prime, beings of every race watched as a human stood beside an alien queen. Not as a servant, but as an equal that day. Something shifted across the stars. The galaxy began to whisper a new story. One not about conquest or fear, but about humanity's endurance, their strange, stubborn refusal to die even when all hope burned away. Later, as the ceremony ended, Ryan stood at the edge of the plaza, looking at the new skyline of Valaris. "It's strange," he said. "I thought I'd be homesick by now." Zura joined him, her golden eyes soft in the fading light. "Perhaps this world is your home too now." He smiled. "Maybe it is." They walked together through the half-built streets, workers bowing as they passed. Humans and aliens shared food. Laughter and stories, no longer strangers, no longer enemies. As night fell, the Queen looked up at the twin moons, her voice low. "When I first met you, I called your people fragile." Ryan glanced at her. "I remember." She smiled gently. "Now I understand. Fragility is not weakness. It is what makes something precious. It is what allows you to rise again after every fall." He looked up at the stars, his eyes reflecting their glow. "Then I guess that's humanity's curse and gift. We break, but we never stop getting up." They stood in silence as lights shimmered across the new city, the ruins glowing softly like embers refusing to fade. That night the galaxy slept differently, knowing that somewhere among the stars lived a species that could turn ashes into light, that could walk through fire and still find kindness on the other side. And though the Queen of Valaris ruled her world once more, every being across the Union knew that when the flames rose again, it would be humanity who would carry them through. Through the flames together, the twin moons of Valaris rose high above the rebuilt city, their silver light washing over towers that still smelled faintly of smoke and new steel. The fires that once consumed the capital were gone, but their memory burned quietly in every heart. Queen Zura walked slowly through the grand memorial garden, a vast circle of marble and glass built upon the ashes of her old palace. At its center stood a monument unlike any other, a tall bronze statue showing a human man carrying an alien queen through the flames. The names of all who perished in the great fire were carved below it. Surrounded by living vines that glowed with soft blue light, Captain Ryan Hale stood beside her, his uniform clean now, though still marked with faint scars from the fire. He looked at the statue and gave a small nod. "They really made me look taller." he said with a half-smile. Zura laughed softly, a sound few had ever heard from her before. Perhaps you earned a little height. Protector. They walked in silence for a while, the night breeze cool, carrying the scent of fresh stone and blooming flowers. Around them, humans and aliens worked together, planting gardens, building homes, and laughing side by side. The city that had once been divided by pride was now united by something deeper. Zura looked at the workers, her golden eyes warm. They rebuild without fear, she said. My people, your people, all of them, they work as one. It feels new. Ryan nodded. Maybe that's what survival looks like. They reached the edge of the garden, where a quiet river reflected the twin moons. Zura stopped there, her voice low. You know, when I called your species fragile, I believed it. I believed power came from strength, from control, from being unbreakable. Ryan looked at her, the moonlight soft on his face, and now? She smiled faintly. Now I know true power is found in those who keep going, even when everything falls apart, in those who choose compassion over fear. He stared at the water, his reflection blending with hers. Then maybe we both changed. The Queen nodded slowly. Yes, perhaps we did. I no longer rule from a throne, I lead beside others. Because of you, Ryan gave a small laugh. I never wanted to change a queen, I just wanted to help. She looked at him, her voice quiet but steady. You didn't just help me. You changed how my people see your kind. You changed how I see myself. In the distance, the hum of construction ships filled the air, the city alive again. Children of both species played near the fountains, their laughter echoing across the square. One small alien girl ran up to Ryan, offering him a glowing flower. For the fire bearer, she said shyly. Ryan knelt and accepted it, smiling. Thank you. Little one. The child ran back to her friends, waving her glowing hand in the air, shouting, Humans are heroes. Zura watched, her expression softening. They call you that now. Across the stars, Ryan shook his head. I'm no hero. I just refuse to stop walking. The Queen turned her gaze to the horizon, where the sun began to rise again over the rebuilt city. Then perhaps that's what heroes truly are, she whispered. As dawn spread golden light across Valaris, the great bells rang for the first time since the fire. Not in mourning, but in celebration. The sound carried through every street and ship. A song of unity and rebirth. Zura stepped forward, addressing the gathered crowd in the plaza. Her voice carried through the loudspeakers. Once I believed our world stood alone, proud and perfect, but perfection shattered in the fire. And from those ashes rose a truth I will never forget. She turned to Ryan, standing beside her as thousands watched. We called them fragile, yet they endured. We called them reckless, yet they saved us, and now humanity stands not behind us, but beside us. The cheers rose, echoing across the city, banners of Earth and Valaris waving together in the wind. Ryan stepped closer and said quietly, You know, Your Majesty, this might be the first time in history our two worlds actually understand each other. Zura smiled. Not the first, Captain, the beginning. They stood together beneath the rising sun, the statue behind them shining in its bronze glow, the firebird of hope reborn in the hearts of millions. Ryan looked up at the sky where distant ships crossed the dawn. So what now? He asked. Zura's eyes followed the same horizon. Now, we build a galaxy where no one walks alone through the fire. He smiled softly. Through the flames together, and as the music of the rebuilding city filled the air, the camera panned upward to the bright sky above, showing both human and alien ships moving side by side, carrying supplies, carrying hope, carrying the promise that from this day forward, the stars themselves would remember what humanity truly was. Fragile perhaps, but unbreakable.